If your website text feels cramped, crowded, or hard to read, your line height and text spacing might be part of the problem. And this is one of those accessibility improvements that helps almost everyone. Today, I'm going to show you how to set more accessible default line height and text spacing in Squarespace. So why does line height and spacing matter? When line height is too tight, the text can start to feel like one big block. That can make reading harder for everyone, including people with low vision, dyslexia, cognitive disabilities, eye strain, or anyone just trying to read on a smaller screen. Oftentimes you'll see this with restaurant menus where the text is really tight and crammed together. You might technically be able to read it, but it takes more effort than it should. Good spacing gives the eye a clear path to follow. WCAG has a guideline called text spacing, which is Success Criteria 1.4.12. That simply means that your website should still work if someone increases the spacing around the text. Some of the standards we're looking at are a line height of at least 1.5 times the font size, paragraph spacing of at least 2 times the font size, letter spacing of at least 0.12 times the font size, and word spacing of at least 0.16 times the font size. The important thing to know is that the guideline does not require every website to be built with these defaults. It's saying that if a user needs to adjust the spacing values, your website should not break, text should not overlap or cut off content or lose any other functionality. But as designers and website owners, we can still use those defaults as a good starting point. For most Squarespace websites, I suggest starting with your body paragraph text. That's the text that people read the most, so it's going to have the biggest impact. A good starting point is to set your body line height to between 1.5 and 1.7 m. That means it's going to be about 1.5 times the size of your base font. Don't ever do negative letter spacing. That will make things way too crowded. And be very careful with the opposite of going too wide with your letter or word spacing. For headings, you can use a slightly tighter line height because headings are usually shorter, but you still want to be sure that multi-line headings don't overlap or feel too cramped. Let's jump into Squarespace so you can see exactly where to make these adjustments.
So here in Squarespace, you're going to want to open any page on your website that has paragraph and heading text and click on Edit. And then we're going to go over and we're going to click the paintbrush icon to open our site styles. And then we're going to open our font settings. Let's start with the paragraph font because that's going to control most of the text on your website. So we will click open paragraphs, and as we know here, Squarespace has 3 paragraph styles for us, paragraph 1, 2, and 3. So you want to make sure if you're using all 3 font styles on your website, you'll want to check all of them to make sure that the line height and letter spacing is good. If you're only using, paragraph 2 and 3, which is pretty common, paragraph 2 is the default generally, then just double check those. So what we're going to do here is look at our demo site, and our font here is Roboto. The line height default for this is 1.3 m, and then the letter spacing is negative 0.02 m. What you want to do before you make any changes at all is take note of these current settings, because if you make any changes and save them, it will adjust all of that text on your site. So you will need to make sure you have time to go through and look at everything and make sure that no text boxes are suddenly overlapping or other elements like buttons and images aren't now kind of colliding with your text. So if you don't have the time right now to make any changes and go in and double check everything, because you'll want to check desktop and mobile, take note of the defaults, write them down, and you can go in right now and make some tweaks, see what you like, and then change it back to the defaults until you have time to go in and make the changes for good. Please, 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 before you do anything, note your default settings so that you have them in case you need to revert to that if things go wonky and you don't have time to correct them right now. What we want to do here, we'll start with our line height. Again, we are working in M here, and then down here you can see our paragraph, like our font sizes are in rem. It's super important to work in those elements because if you were to change this to pixels, pixels restrain the content. So if you set your paragraph text to 1 pixel, it's going to restrain the responsiveness of that element. It works with images and buttons and all other elements too. So it's important to stay in M or rem or even percentages. That will just make the responsiveness to every element much more smoother. And then if a user goes in and adjusts their settings to meet their needs, things will just reflow better and work appropriately. So we're going to stay in M here. Now, this 1.3, it's not bad line height for paragraph 1. Paragraph 2 and 3, especially 3, is pretty tight with 1.3M. So keep your eye on the paragraph 3 specifically, and I will just adjust this to 1.5. That again is our minimum that we're trying to meet for the success criteria if someone adjusts to that. But that looks way much better. For this particular font, I definitely would go to 1.5M if I'm only using paragraph 2 and 3, because 1, that's almost too much spacing for 1, I think. We will go with that. And then we'll go down here to letter spacing. And the one thing I mentioned is you never want to do negative letter spacing. It just is too tight and uncomfortable for reading. So we're going to go in here and we'll adjust this. Let's maybe go to 0.12M is what we're looking for if people were to adjust it to. I think that's a bit too much. The letters are a little too far apart. Maybe if we just go to 0.1M, that looks better here. So if you were doing Roboto text in Squarespace, I would definitely adjust your paragraph spacing to a line height of 1.5 and letter spacing of 0.1M. Now we also want to take a look at our headings. This heading 1 is on 1 line, so you certainly wouldn't need to worry about line height for this. You just want to look at your letter spacing. But what we do want to check is if we have headings that wrap to more than 1 line. So we will shrink this down to be on 2 lines, and you can see the line height, it's not too bad. We could maybe give it a little more cushion. Letter spacing is pretty tight. So we'll go up here and we'll open our site styles again, and we'll go into our fonts. And this time we're going to go into our headings. Here our line height is set to 1.1 and our letter spacing again is at negative 0.02. With headings, you generally don't even ever need to go to that 1.5. That's almost way too much space. A lot of times people will go to 1.3. That's not bad. I would maybe do 1.25 here. And then our letter spacing, again, we need to make sure that's not a negative. Even going to a 0M, too bad. I would maybe go a little bit more. What did we do on that other 1.1? Yeah, I think this one's a little trickier with the headings because the letters are bigger, so you can get away with a little closer letter spacing. I think for the heading, I would just go with a 0, just so it's not negative. You go a little bigger than that, and the letters almost get too far apart. I think I would go with the 0M here for this heading. So for this particular demo, I would adjust our heading line height to the 1.25M and then do our letter spacing at the 0M. I think that looks much more comfortable and easy to read for this particular font. Just a reminder that we're working in M's and Rems here, and you could use percentages. Using these units will ensure that if a user makes adjustments for better readability for themselves, that your website should function appropriately. These again are not requirements that you set your defaults on your website to these amounts. These are just what a user needs to be able to adjust to in order to meet WCAG requirements. I hope this quick tip was helpful, and don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to get tips and tricks like this sent right to your inbox.
Check the description below for that link. And until next time, go out there and make it more accessible.